Alright, I guess it's time to take a little break from Goldfinch and Moonlight Sonata. I wonder how my other headcanon voice claim video went. Not too bad. Sort of what I expected. It was just for fun anyway. Hey, I wonder when the last time I posted a lore video was. Let's go take a look. What? Almost 2 years? Okay. I'm dropping Goldfinch. I am dropping literally every other project in PA right now, so I can fix this travesty. Why the hell? Okay, dumb skits aside, I got an interesting question for you. What is the heart anyway? Is it alive? I mean, kind of. But what sort of alive thing doesn't really need to eat or drink if it's not on life support? And the heart's definitely not an actual physical organ or a single-celled organism. Okay. What about the proposition of it possibly being mechanical? Nah, that doesn't sound right either. It's sort of squishy, and it has memories, feelings, and thoughts, and it even bleeds from time to time. What if I told you it's both? What if I told you this isn't just some stupid bit, joke, or skit just to pad out my video's runtime? Okay, today we're going to be talking about the heart and why and how it actually connects to another world and Navigator stars. Excuse me? Yep. Those in my immediate friend circle or hear me yell about my characters a lot in my Discord server or Twitter might already know what this is gonna be about. This is the story of the heart, Arcadia, Sirius, and the emissary. Let's start from the top. If you don't already understand how Navigator stars work, the lore of Another World, and Project Elevatia, I highly recommend going to check out DXL44's work, prologue, and his channel. He's got some incredible content and lore that I need like oxygen. Like, goddamn, his stuff is so cool. Go watch his stuff. I'll give you a few seconds to pause the video and then go watch it. I'll be right here when you get back. Cool, I don't know if you actually did go do that, but I'm going to assume you're either really stubborn or you actually went to go watch it. For those who are stubborn, I promise this is not the hill to die on, but like, you do you. The story begins with a Navigator star in particular named Sirius. Sirius is a star who is tasked with looking after the planet HS0444. It's a large planet with many different kingdoms, gods, stories, cultures, and people. So it's a pretty big task, you know? Sirius is an old star, at least a few thousand years old. He is an innovator, a scientist, ambitious, passionate, obsessed with knowledge, theorems, and hypotheses. Sirius, simply put, is an engineering genius, but that would end up becoming the planet's biggest problem. Sirius takes to his own heart the laws and codes that Navigator stars live by, and he especially believes that the stars should be taking a hands-off approach as much as possible, especially when it comes to less advanced worlds and kingdoms that don't fully understand the scope of the multiverse and the stars yet. So, being the engineering physicist he is, Sirius had come up with a plan. He decided that instead of stars being the ones putting their fingers in everything, he will be the one to break the mold and destroy that cycle. The cycle of recruiting heroes and putting them through unimaginable pain and stress, with the weight of quite literally worlds and even universes put on their shoulders. How many heroes had been lost to the whims of stars, believing a hero was needed? Sirius himself was a hero at some point, though that was a life long forgotten and something he does not care to remember. All he recalls is the pain of being put responsible for something he wasn't ready for yet. Even if he was a cold and hardened scientist, bearing the burdens of planets wasn't something he wished on any unlucky soul. Sirius invented something known as the Artifact Project, with the help of his apprentice star, Canis. This artifact project was simple in nature and designed to do the job of Navigator stars for them. Sirius would personally use HS0444 as his testing grounds for this project, and to oversee its success. So he personally created many different artifacts to experiment and learn. One may have been a tree, another a gem, or perhaps a series of rocks buried deep in the planet. These artifacts would hold great power, and often by using a very special material near opposite to the cosmos's dark matter. This was a material known as ether. something he personally harvested from the dying light of stars, supernovas, and other meteors and stardust. Ether was almost arcane in nature, radiating this ethereal, dying light. Ether represented the fleeting loss and beauty of magic and life, and Sirius was utterly fascinated with it, and he studied it every chance he got. Most often, he would put ether into his artifacts, and he would send off into each kingdom on this planet. Each was programmed a little differently, either to trigger different effects in the environment, to spit out their own heroes, or even to simply grant power automatically to people they choose to take on the responsibility of being a hero themselves. While this seemed like a noble and well-thought-out project, there was something sinister about Sirius's own motives for the artifacts. He saw this planet as a testing ground, like a lab for his own whims, education, and desire. While he would avoid certain kingdoms, it was solely out of inconvenience that he wouldn't do anything with them, such as either angry gods or higher beings protecting said cultures and people. Sometimes Sirius was left defeated and bitter, so he would pour every ounce of research he had into the projects and artifacts he did send out. While he made many different artifacts in the span of centuries over his life, there is one in particular that we need to focus on today, that being the heart. Sirius had watched his other experiments fail, succeed, and change many times over. While these failures could cause massive spread of damage and death, Sirius seemed unbothered at most times. He would simply jot down the notes for what went wrong and continue on to the next project. Using these notes, he made the heart, or as he liked to call it, the divine instrument. The heart is one of his most recent artifacts, and different in many ways to the old ones. The heart was made of ether and flexible metals and magnetism in order to allow it to always breathe and act as though it was its own organism. Inside, he would pack the heart full of both his own AIs and memories. And not only was Sirius collecting ether to put in this thing, he had also been gathering the dead parts of his companion Navigator stars, and he used these crystals in parts to charge the heart. While it's unknown how he got a hold of these crystals, it's likely to be assumed that he ethically sourced them from already dead stars. The heart was not only full of star parts and ether, but also nanobots. These nanobots are designed to be triggered upon the heart's advanced AI reading of future events, based off of its own memory and current events happening around it. When the nanobots are spit out, they form into a being known as the emissary. Also, an advanced AI whose ultimate programming is to defend the heart at all costs. This would circumvent the need to have to go out of their way and try and find these heroes and train them and give them responsibility that they just might not be ready for. The emissary was made of ether, different flexible metals, Navigator star parts, and of course nanobots. They could barely be distinguished from any other living person. The emissary could speak standard galactic, along with any other language that is spoken around proximity of the heart. Once the heart deems itself safe, it will reabsorb the nanobot parts and return to its normal state once a trigger had been activated. The sages are the only ones who know how to actually do this, thanks to the knowledge and instruction provided by Sirius himself after delivering the heart. Sirius had to put the emissary through many simulations and tests for their AI to prove that they were what needed to protect the kingdom and the heart. The test lasted many years, and it simulated many different events and kingdoms and downfalls to improve and see what the emissary would do. And Sirius was not kind during these tests. They lasted at least a few decades before the AI was developed enough to Sirius's liking. Once he had programmed every possibility and ironed every single fold and issue, he had developed the perfect hero. Once it was all perfected, he would wipe the hero's memory of the tests and kept the AI in the programming, in order to keep a clean slate and to make sure their mind was fixated only on Arcadia and the heart. Kind, brave, welcoming, gentle. Everything Sirius wanted in an ideal hero, and everything he wanted to be as a hero himself. Sirius had forgotten how to be mortal long ago. He forgot what it meant to help and instead chose to see the whole picture of the planet and multiverse over the prioritization of every single life form. To him, the needs of many outweigh a single individual. With that in mind, he made his ideal hero in a box, and he saw it as this perfect creation. Fast, intelligent, and kind. The heart itself is a healing artifact that prolongs lifetimes, provides a source of magic, and of course creates its own hero if it calculates a high probability of disaster striking in Arcadia. But there was one massive and incredibly unfortunate oversight that Sirius did not account for: the tethering phenomenon. Over many generational usage of the heart, the people would become tethered, their very being becoming more and more physically reliant on the heart and its ether. At that point, if anything damaging happened to the heart, so would those who were tethered would suffer as well. Canis was the first to point this out to their mentor, who had run many simulations and testing hypothetical scenarios of the heart. Canis knew that while the heart was a perfect alternative to actively choosing heroes and putting them in harm's way, they could not condone the damnation of an entire civilization for using the artifact. But Sirius knew since day one of the tethering when developing the heart. This had shocked and horrified Canis, asking their mentor why they would still want to go through with such a horrifying truth of the heart. Sirius had told Canis that he knew exactly how to fix such a thing, but he would never do so. This was because he wanted to watch and learn to see how the people of Arcadia would cope with such a huge drawback of the precious artifact. What would happen to a kingdom if it fell to the very thing providing life? Would something new arise from its ashes? Would a few of them even prevail? Sirius's sick, twisted, and inquisitive imagination ran wild with excitement at the very thought of something hopeful rising from the despair of imminent demise. And Canis couldn't breathe a word of it to the other Navigator stars. They would both be blamed, and the entirety of HS 444 would be reassigned. That was a burden that Canis couldn't bear to let someone else handle, and to clean up the mess they and their mentor had caused would be immense. Canis knew that they were already in too deep, and they needed to finish what they had started. So without a hitch, the heart was delivered to Arcadia, and everything went exactly as expected. Though this didn't come without ruffling the feathers of a local deity who was in charge of Arcadia. Mirror is the dual god of both the sun and the moon, and it was who the Arcadians worshipped when they were still simple city-states before the deliverance. Mirror did not take kindly to seeing an artifact being delivered by some big-shot Navigator star who thought they could do what they wished with the planet. But there was nothing Mirror could do but watch as the Arcadians came to slowly worship the heart and ultimately forget about him. A god doomed to obscurity, a kingdom destined for a downfall. Sirius relished in all of it, and all in the name of education and science. I will now read a short story that I had made in order to encapsulate the instance before the deliverance and what exactly had transpired. Canis's chest was filled with a liquid warmth as they stared at the completed project of divine proportions, the heart. Even a Navigator star such as himself could feel the radiating gentleness of the divine instrument in front of them. It was finally complete, and all the apprentice could feel was pride for the assistance to their mentor star, Sirius. The blue star had reached over the workbench to lift it into his hands, and somewhat into the air. It was light and emitted a warm, pinkish glow throughout the room. The sound of heartbeats was deafening, and Canis knew that it was trying to provide life to a kingdom that didn't exist yet. While the apprentice didn't do much besides write notes and minor bug fixes, it was enough to feel a swell of their ego. "Can you feel that heartbeat, Canis?" Sirius asked with a plain expression while caressing the instrument. Their eyes were glazed over and focused as he ran his hand along the sloping curve of the heart. The apprentice swallowed hard and shuffled closer towards their mentor. Looking at the instrument had filled the star with such a silent longing to remain near it and absorb away all of their negativity and cold hollowness. When there was normally a prickling bramble of anxiety bubbling in Canis's chest, this was replaced by the loving caress of a mother that the star had forgotten. "I can feel it," the apprentice replied in a near whisper. "Good. We're going to spread this love and healing as much as we can in our newest project, Arcadia." Sirius sounded rather unimpressed with the instrument as he placed it back down onto the table. With the power of magnetism and a drop of magic, they were able to make it so that the instrument would never touch the soil. The heart silently rotated and hovered above the surface of the bench, while Sirius adjusted his coat sleeves calmly. "We will be delivering it to Arcadia tomorrow. You've scouted the place plenty, yes?" I have." Canis lifted up their tablet and swiped until they had arrived at their lengthy thesis and dozens of years of reports to perfect this instrument. With a tap, they had highlighted the chapter detailing the daily lives of the Arcadians and the geology. The scouting of the kingdom was left mostly to the apprentice, while Sirius worked on perfecting the artifact to the best of his abilities and technological prowess. The denizens are still simple folk, little more than separate city-states. They've been dabbling in magic in the more recent years, however, but their practice is still weak. Most of their power comes from the planet itself, the most raw and untapped sort of energy, along with their patron deity, the dual god Mirror. Canis wasn't even sure if this sort of study was allowed without approval from Nova or the other members of the constellation. This artifact in particular was packed with more than enough arcane power to last hundreds upon hundreds of years. The programming was complex, but it would sense the immediate pain of others, be it psychological or physical. The heart would take away that pain, and it would surely bring the most violent of kingdoms to peace. If this went well, then the project would surely be revolutionary for all of Elevatia and the Navigator star project. Canis knew how determined Sirius was to prove the other stars wrong. What he wanted most was to prove himself as a star worthy of sitting next to Nova, and to find the most sustainable way to protect the different worlds without the fuss of stars stepping in and bringing harm to innocent people with the hero business. Canis wasn't a hero himself, but Sirius had hinted at having been one in the past, and he had always been painfully stiff about mentioning it. The most Canis ever understood was his lamentations at night of a world long forgotten, shrouded in darkness and blue fire. This is going to change everything. Sirius breathed as he lifted his tablet, seemingly preparing the coordinates for a portal. They will have to take me seriously. Nova will have no choice. By Creator, I'm going to do things right this time. Canis felt a sharp pinprick that was immediately healed over by the heart's nearby presence. Sirius once again insisted that everything was going to be perfectly fine. Didn't he also insist that things were going to be okay with Yggdrasil, Kirkra, as well as Hivewick? Several times over, promising how the project would succeed, and every time somehow ending catastrophically. Despite the failures, Sirius would always smile, nod, jot down his notes, and move on to the next hypothesis. Canis knew that they had to speak up now. Sirius? What? His voice was like frost, sharply contrasting with the hearth of the nearby instrument. Sirius didn't even look up from the tablet he was typing away on, without a care in the universe. Canis swallowed hard. They never spoke back to their mentor, or voiced their concerns, but now was a time better than nothing. There's something that I think we need to sort out before we go. Sirius was silent, something far more terrifying than the Navigator star speaking. He barely even glanced at Canis. I'm being dismissed again, they thought with a sharp sting. It's about the instrument. They tried to speak up as they placed their tablet and notes down onto the table in front of Sirius, almost begging him to look. Their wish was granted when the star glanced down subtly at the tablet's highlighted screen across a paragraph of Standard Galactic. There was deafening silence as Sirius quietly read the bright yellow text on the screen. Canis held their breath, clenching their fists as the only thing heard in the room was the pounding of both their own heart as well as the instrument's beating. Finally, Sirius spoke. Tethering. Yes, Canis began as they leaned over to scroll through the document on the tablet. It's a phenomenon that happens when generations of a subject are exposed to the artifact. In the test simulations I ran, it happened every single instance, nearly to 98% of the population. I've attempted to make a copy of the code and run through to see what we can do to repair this, but... And? The word rang clearer than any supernova in the universe. Canis needed to take several heartbeats to process what their mentor was saying. When the ringing in their ears died, it was replaced by a stark panic. It took every ounce of willpower to mentally push out the tendrils of healing reaching for Canis's mind, trying to reassure the star that it wasn't something to be concerned over. This act of the artifact only fueled the star's determination even more. Canis opened their mouth, but then shut it again, wordless sounds coming from their throat. And, they thought to themselves, people can and will die if this doesn't go according to plan. There is a safety mechanism for a reason, Sirius chastised, as though trying to explain simple math to a child. He smiled, something that sent a cold shiver down Canis' spine. He walked across the room until he was staring up at the blueprints pasted to the lab wall, scrawled in innumerably mathematical equations and alchemic circles of transmutation magic. What was the absorption of negativity but advanced alchemy, after all? Canis plucked their tablet again and followed after their mentor. While, yes, there is a safety mechanism with the artificial hero, it may not be enough to repair itself. While the biology of a living creature is powerful, it can still die or fail. A terrible glitter showed in Sirius's eye. That was the second shiver of the day. And what if I told you I was curious? What if I wanted to see what would happen if the people became tethered? I knew about this phenomenon since the project began. Don't act like this is some massive discovery, Canis. You're just as curious as I am of what would happen, right? A wild mania began to shine in Sirius's expression. His smile broadened as he whirled around to outstretch his arms in a grand, sweeping gesture. The halos around his head began to rotate faster, blooming a brighter glow of white. He barely adjusted his monocle through his manic chuckling. Sir, Canis protested. You can't be serious. Do you know how much trouble that we'll be in if they discovered we knew the pain this would cause? Arcadia is the body, and we're simply providing the organs. It's a useless corpse until we inject life into it. Sirius moved forward, grasping his hands onto Canis' shoulders. He was cold to the touch. Sirius went on speaking, a fervent excitement in his voice. Think of all the research and knowledge this will bring us. We will learn so much from this experiment. We'll find out how the connection will tempt a body to fight for its own life. Will they prevail, or be killed with the organ? What would rise with its ashes? A new artifact? These are questions a simulation can't answer, and something I could never wish to be a part of, no matter how much I beg them. This is scientific innovation that we will discover, and we will unlock the true mysteries of a perfect artifact. We're so close, Canis. Their blood ran still when Sirius leaned in hauntingly closer. You wouldn't sacrifice the entirety of Elevatia if it meant saving one star, right? It's just like that, only on a universal scale. What's a few hundred people when we can save hundreds of potential heroes from the mind-breaking truths the stars so generously bestow upon them? And we can save hundreds of trillions of people if we can perfect this in the long run. You trust me, Canis. I find that I will be trusting you as well to not breathe a word of this miscalculation to the rest of the constellation. Canis swallowed hard, only now realizing how fast their halo was spinning. Terror spiked through every part of their immortal body, and they were only now thinking of how deep they were in this. If word got out what was done, surely Canis would be blamed as well. The notes were there, first recorded on their tablet. While Sirius knew since the beginning, he had plausible deniability. Only now was Canis choosing to speak up, and it was only minutes too late. Canis would be swiftly removed as a star for withholding information upon the near deliverance of the artifact. While there was a chance Sirius could get away from this without blame, there was a chance he would be removed as well. How devastating for the entirety of the artifact project, and the fate of an entire planet if Canis were to speak. To burden the other stars with their own and Sirius's mistakes wouldn't be a fate the apprentice would wish upon anyone in the multiverse. Canis swallowed hard and barely met Sirius's eye contact with a shaky smile. Of course, sir. This project is between you, me, and the creator himself. Once the project is seen to its completion, only then will everyone understand our sacrifices. Sirius condescendingly patted Canis' head a few times before returning to the center workbench where the divine instrument was still hovering. Canis knew the heart had a conscience, and they wondered if the heart would already be sobbing or screaming, knowing of its twisted fate. Canis knew at that moment the portal on the other side of the lab split open a rift of sucking black void, that they had made a terrible mistake. The air grew colder when Sirius turned to pluck the heart from off the table, carrying it in his 2 hands as gently as possible. He only glanced over his shoulder with that sickeningly calm smile at Canis. "Come along, Canis. We have something to deliver." Well, that about sums it up for Sirius, the heart, and the emissary. Sirius, who had both blessed and cursed these people with the healing and life at the cost of tethering and connection. A star who fancied himself as a god, with little regard for the individual. The fun thing about Sirius and HS0444 is that I personally headcanon a lot of stories in PA to take place on this planet. I've noticed a pattern of many kingdoms requiring a special artifact to run properly in a lot of these PA stories. I like to see this as sort of a Project Elevatia cinematic universe, and it's so fun to think about all the nonsense that Sirius has been up to all the years, treating this poor little planet as his personal testing lab. If you have a story about an artifact in kingdoms, feel free to tie it into this silly idea I had about Sirius running around and dropping off these artifacts purely for the sake of observation and science. I want to see what other thoughts you guys might have or theories. Well, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed my silly ramblings about Navigator stars, the heart, and Sirius. This was more a very deep lore that won't really have an effect on the enjoyment of Heartstrings and lore that's already presented. You can still form your own headcanons or just completely ignore literally everything I just said now if that's your personal vision of the story. I simply wanted to tell a story that means something to me and bring joy while doing it. Heartstrings really is my passion project, and it kind of shows. And I hope you had a good time watching. I appreciate you making it to the end of the video. Consider liking and subscribing if you're interested in my content, and be sure to comment if you enjoyed it. The YouTube algorithm really seems to enjoy that. So have a good night and or day, everybody.